welcome to tonight's meeting of the Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California, the nation's oldest and largest public affairs discussion forum. Commonwealth Club organization is based right here in San Francisco. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational organization. We've been around since 1903. Not me, but close. I'm Dr. Ann W. Smith, member of the organization's Board of Governors and chair of the member-led forums and chapters. They are special interest groups of volunteers. And I'm the organizer for tonight's program. I very cordially invite you to become members and join in. How we will do this program is that our panel of artists will have certain things they'd like to say, and you can think about questions that you would like to ask. And at about a half an hour, we will ask you if you want to raise your hand and ask a question. I will come around with the microphone. Okay? So, be ready. Thank you very much. And as you've seen on the advertisement, the title says "Takes All Kinds," and the second part is it's about American stories, and the other part is who is doing this. Dan Hoyle, our middle person here, is the person who I have known for quite a long time, and who I was thrilled that he would be able to come and talk to the Commonwealth Club. We don't get enough artists speaking to the club, and so I'm very happy when we get someone like him who has been gathering American stories and ideas and performing those stories and ideas and working with people of all kinds to make the world a better place. So, and he has with him also tonight his director, Aldo Billingsley, who's also an actor and director of great renown and a professor at Santa Clara University in the Department of Theater Arts, and Michael Socrates Moran, who is the artistic director of Oakland Theater Project, which does all kinds of, you're not going to believe this, theater that works out very well. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan to introduce yourselves and explain why you're here tonight. And then I have a couple of questions, and you'll have questions for each other, and we will continue. Thank you. Onward.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you all for coming here. What an honor and a pleasure and a privilege. My name is Dan Hoyle. I'm an actor, playwright, creator of journalistic theater or immersion research journalism. I specialize in the journalism of hanging out. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, I'm the actor, playwright of Takes All Kinds, and I'll pass it along.
Hi, Aldo Billingsley. I have been at Santa Clara University. This is my 29th year there, and have acted around the Bay and have seen all but one of Dan's shows, and was brought into the project by Michael Socrates Moran.
My name is Michael. I'm the co-artistic director of the Oakland Theater Project, the executive artistic director and a co-founder. And I was lucky enough to be connected with Dan and at the very beginning of this project.
So we thought we'd take you through the process. We have the amount of time to really talk about it all. And one of the things I sometimes get asked is, so do you have an idea for a type of characters you want to play? And no, it really starts with an idea or a question that I have about the world. and I start as a journalist. So for this show, Takes All Kinds, I was really interested originally in trying to create something about reconciliation. And I originally was going to go to South Africa. I spent a month working on contacts to go to South Africa. I had people there. But the more I would talk to them in Zooms and emails, the more they were saying, that's really old news. South Africa's dealing with a whole different other host of problems. Why don't you try Colombia? I had been to Colombia. I spent another month working up contacts in Colombia. And I went, talked to former combatants on all sides, talked to activists, social workers, journalists, cabbies, guys hustling in the streets. But right before I went to Las Vegas. And Las Vegas is a great place to go if you want to talk to a real swath of America real quickly. And it's a cheap flight from Oakland. And so I went there, and it was just kind of like a testing the pulse. And I had been locked down pretty hard during the pandemic. We had our second child the day we got our vaccines. So we kind of got baby lockdown after pandemic lockdown. So I was just kind of opening up into the world. And pretty much everyone I talked to was kind of like, reconciliation? No, we're in the trenches right now. The battle lines are being drawn. Particularly this one woman who I met who had this really compelling story. And so I completely shifted. And I said, okay, I'm going to make a show about where are the battles being fought in this country? Where are the places that are the future is being decided? So I went to Sarasota, Florida, where all these school board meetings had basically been hijacked a bit by Moms for Liberty, and they had 3 school board members that had taken over the school board. And Sarasota, just for like a Bay Area comp, is like Atherton or something. It's not like a redoubt of MAGAism. So they were all shocked. And of course, the guy I ended up meeting was a guy who grew up as a conservative Christian. His dad was a preacher. He's got a big wad of dip in his mouth. He became a big fish enthusiast, like PHISH, followed them all around the country, took a bunch of acid, had his mind completely redirected. His daughter came out as being gay, and now he's being an activist, the most unlikely activist. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting, because he's a story of somebody who has changed, and now he's trying to create change himself. So that became the focus of the show. And I found myself talking to a guy who de-radicalizes violent extremists in rural Missouri, a guy who grew up hard in Chicago, got hard into gang activity, had a really, really rough childhood, and came out the other side and has now dedicated his life to one-on-one talking to the most extreme folks and giving them empathy when they least deserve it as the pragmatic pathway out of that radicalization. I found myself talking to, I went to a barbershop in Las Vegas, and I'm talking to all these guys who are ribbing each other and capping on each other, but also talking about their politics while they're scrolling Instagram, while they're talking about what they did last night. I was in a bar in the Carolinas, and he gives me the beer, and he says, why are you so happy? And I told him, well, I'm just out again, and I'm really enjoying getting a chance to talk to people again. That's kind of how I heal post-pandemic, and said all this stuff. And he looked at me and said, we got a hippie here. Yeah. But then he ended up telling me his whole story, that he was a former Blackwater contractor, and that he had gone into it because it was kind of the way out of poverty, and he felt tremendous guilt about the things he had done there. And sort of just started, all these things started opening up to me, and started creating this show that felt like it was, how does democracy happen? These are places of democracy: barbershops, bars, street corners. I went and I'm embedded with canvassers in Atlanta who are registering voters on the streets, like really just going into different neighborhoods and talking to dudes and basically trying to win them over who have never voted for their whole lives. And yeah, all these, and one story leads to another. Like I met this woman in Charleston, South Carolina, who through a random DNA test found that her family were some of the biggest slave traders in Charleston, which was the biggest slave port in the country. And instead of going private, which is what people had done for generations, she went public about it and then started talking to all her neighbors and friends and people at church and getting them to open up about it, but doing it in this really sweet way that they couldn't deny her Southern gentility. And she introduced me to other people. And so it just kind of amasses into this collection of stories. So then and as I'm talking, when I'm talking to people, there's times when you kind of feel this connection, and that's a lot what I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody who's vulnerable, somebody who's open, somebody who has a story that they want to be shared and is willing to let me in on a deep level, because I know then they are giving me this gift that I can then take and honor and share out to thousands of people. So it self-selects a little bit. Like if somebody really doesn't want to talk, then I'm not going to push it, because I know if I'm going to be pulling teeth, it's not going to be a deep, interesting story. And in that relationship, I think is the thing that I think maybe distinguishes kind of the work I do, is that people often feel like, oh, they feel like they're meeting somebody who placed their trust in you. And that is a powerful thing, because then the audience, when they're seeing the show, whether they're seeing me play 3 characters or one person, they get that experience of like, they're always talking to the Dan.
Can I jump in there?
Yes.
I tell audiences often, not every performance, but often when Dan is performing, I'll get up and do an intro and tell them that they're about to observe magic that's going to happen. And that the magic is that Dan has gone around to all these different places, and a lot of the places that he's been to are some of the most purple places in the country, so he can talk to people that are on both sides of the aisle. And he interviews loads more people than he brings to the stage. I don't know what you think that ratio might be for that number of people that you talk to versus the number that actually end up on stage. And sometimes people he's talked to have seen his work, and then they're stoked because they might get on stage, and so they have a conversation, and they get done, they go, are we in? Do we make it? How's the audition? And so, so that ratio is very, very different. But what I tell an audience is, you're about to become Dan Hoyle. And now you are going to be the person who has these extraordinarily acute listening skills and listens not just to the story being told, but how it's told, the behaviors that the person has. And they now are going to become that person. And so Dan jumps up and he becomes somebody, and he tells that story. And then one of the best parts of the evening for me is the lights go out on that character, and you finish that story, and people applaud, and Dan moves up stage to get a glass of water so he can drink, and because you need to, because you've been talking that long, and so he'll drink, and then he'll shift his hair. His hair is about this length, but the hair will shift. Is it now going to be in the wrap? Is it going to be in a ponytail? Is it going to be in the side? And the audience then gets to watch him transform, and while he's silhouetted, because the lights are out, you can see him, but the lights are basically out. You don't know male or female. You don't know age. You don't know where they're from. You don't know if they're able-bodied or if they've got some sort of disability. And then that person starts walking towards you, and you're trying to figure all those things out, and then they speak, and you're like, boom, and this magic thing happens. And when we were in Joe's pub, which shouldn't be a place where we should do this show. We shouldn't work there.
Explain to the good people what Joe's Pub is.
Joe's Pub is in New York City. It's the New York Public Theater. The original artistic director was Joe Papp, and so they call this pub Joe's Pub, which is kind of a bar and a place where you can eat, and it's would-be dinner theater, except by the time he's done his second or third character, people stop having dinner. And then the knives and forks stop. Would that all the waiters would also stop bringing the card reader by to take the check. And everybody's focusing in on this work that is so unique and absolutely 100% live theater. And that's pretty magical.
Just to add to that, I mean, one of the things that I'm so taken by is that so many of these stories are touching things in the headlines, but it's sort of, we don't get to hear the personal, maybe we hear the personal story, but I don't get to meet them all the time. And in the magic of the theater, in that moment of imagination, somehow I feel like all of a sudden I'm in proximity to the real cost of the stories that are happening. And it seems to be this sort of wonderful hybrid of journalism, which is gathering sort of stories and information, and then theater, which is making it personal and making it in proximity. And I remember, where I entered the story, and Dan, maybe you can talk to this. You came to me already with the play, so you'd already pretty much made some decisions about which ones to cut, which ones to keep, and you had kind of the whole thing. But I remember you also asking me at one point, you're like, "Is this a show? Does this hold together?" And just for he did it for me. I was like, "Well, show me." And so he did the show, and at the end of the show, it was just me. It was just me. He did the whole thing, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is really moving." And Dan was like, "I don't know." So I later on in the process, I was like, you need a director who's an actor. You need someone. You also need someone, and maybe you can speak to this in your work. This is my opinion. Who isn't cynical? Like the work isn't cynical, and right now it's just so easy. It's so easy to be cynical. And what I find so moving about it is there is this perseverance of the human spirit in the core of all of these different people from, all different kinds of backgrounds. And there's a triumph to that. And there's a triumph and an awe in getting to see one person be able to capture an essence, so many different essences, and with so much heart, I think. And to have that sense of awe in the human spirit right now, when I was like, you should reach out to Aldo, I was like, you need to have someone who respects that, who values that. And if I dare say so myself, it was a good match.
It was.
Well, but part of the match, and thank you for that. That's a wonderful compliment. Is that what he's talking about? What Dan has just described is he's finding people who are very much Dan-like, who have a story and are trying to figure out how to share their truth with other people, whether they're in Sarasota, Florida, and they're running the town's Reddit trying to communicate their story to some other people, or they're barbers who are talking politics and they're talking noise to each other and they're cutting hair at the same time while they're doing all these things. And you go into those environments and it's some of those people who are actively doing that. But the journalist is going, I need to balance this story with this story. And even if it's not 100% or 50% one side and 50% another, to know that we're going to be able to get proximate with these other individuals and hear a perspective that doesn't just, resort to name calling.
Like the story of, I mean, forgive me, I'm blanking on the church,
Mm-hmm.
Dylan Roof.
Well, yeah, Polly. Well, but Polly comes from Margaret, Margaret is the woman who found her DNA and then said, oh, this is what's happening. And instead of, as Dan said, instead of going internal, I have this shame about this, goes out and puts up plaques and then becomes a member of a Bible study that's integrated in Charleston, South Carolina. When Dan and I went, one of the most integrated spaces that we encountered the entire weekend was the theater. And we were looking around. It's like, okay, you and I are riding around in this. Was it a pickup?
Yeah, SUV. Yeah, we got the rental.
They give us an
yeah.
SUV. I just realized we were rolling around South Carolina in a truck. Anyway, and we're looking around and we're not seeing that diversity. But when we got into the theater, it was there. And so, because Margaret's going to the Bible study that was integrated Bible study, she met Polly Shepard. And Polly Shepard is the sole survivor of the AME church massacre. And if you remember Obama singing Amazing Grace, it was because of Charleston. And Margaret said, you have to go meet Polly. And Dan was like, he's one of the bravest people I know, who sometimes has to be kicked into his bravery. And Margaret was kicking. And he was like, I don't know. And she sent him to meet Polly. She didn't tell Polly that a white boy was going to come up to her door. She didn't tell Polly that a white man who was young, after Polly witnessed so many of her friends get shot by a white man who was young, was coming up to her front door. And Polly Shepard let him in. Yeah. And so then he gets to sit down, and she trusts him with that story. And I will tell you right now, I have never worked harder to promote a play that I'm not in. I swear to God, my wife is like, "Wait, what? You going where now?" It's like I need to go introduce this story.
So a story like that, I'm like debating like how do I tell this story? And we went through all these iterations, and we finally just said we just need to honor it the way all the other stories are honored. And then we got the real beautiful call to go back to Charleston and perform the show for both Margaret and Polly and their whole communities. And so I performed before in Nigeria. I did a show called Things They Happen where I lived in Nigeria for a year, and I got to go back to Nigeria and perform it in 5 different cities. And it was kind of like that because I've had other just like people come, one person come, but when you have not just that person but their community, where there's that sense of collective witness, it becomes the closest thing I know to the divine, where I'm delivering Margaret, and she happens to be in my line of sight. And I know that because I heard her laugh, and she has this very distinctive laugh, this and I heard her earlier in the show doing that, so I know that I'm doing that for her. I don't know. Her husband told me that later she was then crying, and then before that I'm doing Polly, and it's to her and these 2 other pastors who came together, one black, one white, who came together after the massacre and kind of led Charleston forward. And I'm doing it for them. And I can't let the meta moment of like, oh my God, this is happening. No, I need to stay inside and honor that gift that they've given me and share it back out as precisely and as truthfully as I can. But it was just like so powerful. We did talkbacks afterwards. And so that's kind of the full circle. And it's a really, it's incredibly gratifying and validating because there's so many layers of this honoring that happen. Because I do all this audio recording, I hang out with people, I try to really, I say the journalism of hanging out because it's not just like an interview. It's like, okay, well now take me to some place that's interesting to you. So, when I'm hanging out with the canvassers in Atlanta, they're going to take me to their bar, and then they're going to take me to a Braves game, and then they're going to, or I'm hanging out with Margaret. She's going to take me to the neighborhood where she grew up and to the old house that she used to live in. And so you get this like full relationship experience. So when we got to go back there, and then perform that for them. And we have somebody who came to the show in Charleston and was like, wow, that was so moving to see that thing happen that I want to try to fund you to go to another city. So we're working on going to
another city
where people whose stories are in the show are there. So we're working on going to Atlanta so that the canvassers can come back and see it. All of that is to say, the other really important thing is it has to be good and it has to be funny and it has to be entertaining and it has to be lively. Like, it's not a, as Bill Withers says, it's not one of those, droney church services. It's one of those, if you're gonna help me, Jesus. He has this little in his live album. He has this little riff, and that's what it is. So the thing that we hear over and over again is, and speaks about all the Michael's talking about, is like people. They're like, I felt oddly hopeful.
by design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How you felt
Oddly hopeful. Like how could I feel hopeful about the state of the country, but I did.
Well, I think too. I mean, I have this theory about theater in general, where if you're like, if you'd say, what did you see last night, and you can just recount the plot, like of Hamlet or something, it doesn't do the thing justice, right? Like Hamlet, uncle, dad, problems. And same with Dan. I mean, in a way, you tell these stories, and I mean, they are heavy. I mean, they're extraordinarily heavy, but the craft of it is part of what keeps it alive. There's vitality. It's an alive experience, and as an audience member, you're also like, you're in on it because you're watching this one person, and you're like, how are they? Especially, I imagine at Joe's Pub, after the first two, you're like, wait, he's going to do this for every single one. So but I'm wondering if you can talk to this, because I suspect that part of what makes the thing come alive is the investment that you have in the people that you're interviewing. And I suspect that's an unquantifiable kind of thing, but that you've got to fall in love with them a little bit as people in order for that love to manifest in the work, in the midst of all of the craft that goes along with it. So that, because there's another version of that where it's like, okay, met you for 5 minutes, thank you so much, got you down.
Right.
Which is not what you're doing. And I think sometimes it's just, that's not necessarily what people would know. I think it's what you feel when you see it.
Yeah, that's really astute. And yeah, to try to fill people in. So I do a lot of audio recording. I take photos, but not a ton, but some. And I will sometimes take like a 20-second video, but I don't actually do like a full-on video recording, because I want to be present to the person. And I also feel like there's this evolutionary thing we have where if we really just blot out everything and we do tunnel vision focus on somebody, we just try to take in their essence of who they are as a person, we can kind of encode some of that into our brain, into our body. That being said, then I work for hours and hours and months at a time, listening to the audio recordings, working on the physicality. I have an incredibly large mirror that's difficult to source outside of very esoteric people. And I work and a lot of actors say, oh my God, that's terrifying. Why do you watch yourself? You're not supposed to watch yourself. But I'm like, well, you have to know what are you doing? What are you creating? How is it coming off? Is it working? And when I start to see somebody else in the mirror who's not me, and that can take hours and months. And there's times when I'm like so frustrated because I want to honor this person's story, but I can't see. I still see myself. When I can no longer see myself, when I see this other person, I start talking to me as them. Then I feel like, okay, now I have got this. I've got this. Something I'm able to do it justice. And then there's a huge amount of sculpting these many days, because mostly now I like to go back twice. If there's somebody that's really, I try to go back again and talk to them again and hang out with them again, sculpting it all down to 5 or 7 minute little scene. And then I start working. So like Aldo came aboard and this barbershop scene was a mess. There was like, people were like, was there 5 characters or 7? I couldn't tell. I was like, there was supposed to be 4. That's probably a bad thing. And starts working on the physical precision so that the thing that I want people to see, they can see. Okay, so let's line up the barbers 1, 2, 3, so you can toggle back and forth between them. And by the way, when you're lining up somebody's neck, you can't be sort of like broad stroking it. And we were actually rehearsing in Oakland Theater Project, and there happened to be a set of clippers there. So Aldo was like, "All right, you're gonna line me up. We're gonna go to the bathroom right now." And so I did. I started.
He freaked out. What? You want me to get right here? Cut my hair? Dude, I didn't cut. You're gonna cut my hair? You're just gonna trim my neck. Take those clippers. And what was the MLK show that you had?
The mountaintop.
No, the before Mountaintop. Yes, me too. But there was a character who was an actor who was playing Martin Luther King, besides the one that they just closed, where Terrence Smith was playing Martin Luther King. No.
Sam Jackson was in it.
Yes.
And
And so I said, "You're going to do this," and he was so scared that his hand got much more precise as he's giving this cut, and said, "That's what's going on," because you also don't want to, do that to your customer and have them come out of the chair
Interesting,
upset.
because so I teach acting at UC Berkeley. Those are two very different techniques of acting.
Yes.
Like one is a very outside in, which
Yep.
that's an amazing experience. That's an amazing experience to look in the mirror and then get to a point where you don't recognize. I mean, that's incredible. And it's true, because when you watch it, it's true. But that's just such a rigorous thing. But then a sort of inside out, like, wait, no, you actually have to do the thing to get at this piece of truth. That's
So, and just we're just gonna have a little acting coach dialogue here, because what you're right. The outside in, instead of what motivates this person, what's their objective, what is it they want, what's in the way of what they want, what are the obstacles. Instead, I'm going to go here, and how does this shift, and how does that shift, and where does that go, and how does this shift, and all those sorts of things, so that I can see that it's a different person. And then, when we're doing this, it was more about mime. It was just more about clean mime, and I could tell from the way that he was doing that he hadn't cut anybody's hair. But if you watch him make a cocktail on stage, he's got that down. He's very precise. So, but the thing that Dan's talking about being able to lose yourself allows the audience to lose Dan and to see the other people. So that can you talk a little bit about Fitz and his voice and how quickly you can jump into that and let people know that you're not hurting yourself and you're gonna be all right?
I when I teach this stuff, and it's actually really hard to teach journalistic theater. It's the hardest thing to teach, because you have to tell people to not be interested in what's going on in your own head when you're talking to other people. It's not about your internal monologue of, am I doing this right? Am I coming off? You really have to let that go and have all your brain power on this other person, which I love teaching, but it's really, really hard to teach because our society is 100% incentivized in the opposite direction. But yeah, and then when I get to the point where I'm working on these different characters, I always tell it has to be like, it has to just be molds that you're popping into. So, there can't be anything like, now I need to do this, now I need to do that. You have to be so comfortable in these people that they're just like 12 or 15 different molds that you can just pop into. Because really the goal is to lose yourself in front of an audience, then that's the final step. And audiences are incredibly important because they keep you accountable, they keep you honest, and we always do a ton of workshops. It drives everyone crazy because I'm like, no, you didn't see the show, you just came to the workshop. They're like, well, I came to 2 workshops. I'm like, but yeah, that's part of where it goes. And did you have something? Sorry.
I was asking about you backed up and did that. Is my mic on? My microphone is.
Yes, it is.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
I was going to say, okay, back up a little bit, slow down, because part of the process is that it's a process, and it doesn't. You don't get it just like that. So, how do you slow down enough to make the point that you want to make with the people that you're trying to promote or to be?
Well,
How do you step back?
well, the thing that is really important to me is to try to go in with an open mind and really let the people dictate what the piece becomes. So it's not like I want to make a statement about this. It really to me it has to be a piece of journalism. It has to be a piece of real, like, deep immersion, and I love it. I love it when I'm surprised, and I love in contradiction and complexity, because that's the reality. And part of what a lot of times happens is, and people talk about this, is they're like, well, I have my narratives about what's happening in the country, and they come and they meet these people and they just go, huh? Like, how that person believes this, and that? I've never met a person that believes. I thought those things are contradictory. I'm like, well, they're not for a lot of people. So just trying to, like, honor the truth of that is really important, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, when you came, I think, if I remember correctly, you put the show, and then you didn't even know what it was about.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think it's about democracy. I mean, I don't know. I don't even remember why. I just remember feeling like, I think that all of these are getting, and then you end with the people trying to get people registered.
Bingo.
You know, and this was pre-election. And so maybe you guys can talk to the difference between what it was before Trump's reelection and then now, because if the trying to get people to vote is trying to get Biden, people to vote for Biden, and so
Right.
now it takes on a different. There's also this joke which I remember loving, which is like, what's the joke about sleepwalking into?
Oh yeah, it's like, sorry, we have to tell her. You know, it's good to be busy, but it'd be weird to have to tell our kids when they're older. Or sorry about fascism, we were overscheduled. Which, yeah, people kind of go, oh,
Yes.
there is that.
There's that kind of a grimace laugh that happens there. But you're exactly right that it's when Anne told you what the title of the play is, she was important. She knew it was important to say these are tales about democracy, and one of the characters say, you know, democracy's cool, enjoy it while it lasts. So to have that statement in there earlier, but to end with, can I get you registered?
Yeah.
Can I get you registered as the last lines of the play? It is hopeful. And it does send us in I think, in the right direction toward action when you're leaving the theater.
And they were, at that point, they were just trying to register folks. They weren't yet, there was two armed. They weren't trying to be, but yeah.
I think too that the piece about the spirit of democracy is that all these characters have so much contradiction. Like, it somehow obfuscates ideology. Like, it's like, oh no, the human being is hugely contradictory. And then all of a sudden hearing, and at times watching a character and being surprised at their politics, you know, is really strangely edifying. It's sort of like, oh, whoa, what bubble am I in? Or, you know, these are people that, in my opinion, a lot of times we're sort of in our own lanes in society, and it's very difficult to have meaningful, deep relationships with people across race and class. And the people that you've interviewed are kind of all across the spectrum. And so then getting to be in proximity to that is both powerful, but also kind of speaks to the democratic spirit, which I sort of don't realize I'm starved of in our culture until I see something like this. And then I feel like, wait a second, how come I'm not meeting these people? Like, where, like what's the larger crisis that's happening that might be a little deeper than just the politics of it?
Or are you meeting those people and you don't realize
Exactly,
it because you're not
yeah.
listening the way that he is in those deep ways? So that
Yeah.
And when we hear those moments, sometimes the laugh lines tell us more about who we are than who we think we're listening to. So when you talked about the guy in Sarasota who has the daughter who came out and he's got a dip of tobacco in his lip, and you say that he moved to Florida after what and for what?
Oh, for the schools? Yeah.
But after he got his...
Oh, he got his master's, yeah, in master's in computer engineering. I can't remember the exact line right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people...
Right.
And there's this laugh, and then that's their expectation of who that person would be. And that's a surprise for them that, oh, because he was talking like this and he's dipping like that, and that he said something about the schools, and then you find out, well, I did not think master's degree, and I did not think MS, Master's of Science, and what? No. And so that we get to open up our own perspectives a little more about our neighbors, our fellow citizens. So to hear the mom say, I don't know who you are, but I'm here because I don't want my child to be ashamed for who they are. Decent goal. How you go about it. but at the root, it's a decent goal.
Just to go back to the South Carolina experience, I wish I got to see it. But I just because I do believe, I mean, running a theater, I believe that theater has many different powers to it, but maybe essentially right now there is a aspect of healing that can be a part of it. And I don't know that I've heard a story that feels more more healing at the core wound of the country. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to that more, the healing experience of what if that's what
Dan,
it was.
can I just real quick to say, after the performance, Dan brought Margaret on stage and he brought Polly on stage. And Polly turned to Dan and said, there are a lot of people who've told this story, but you got it right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that, and I don't want to get too precious talking about, my work, but I guess that's what we're here to do.
Get Precious. Come on, Precious.
I guess that's my lottery ticket. Is one of the I looked up like this idea of collective witness, and it does go back to this idea of the divine, and the idea being that you can, part of the power of art is it can take something that is incredibly painful, and through art it alchemizes the experience to have a different meaning. And so the meaning of doing this show in that place was one of joy, even when you're telling this story. And I think partly it's because how the heck did this little scrawny white dude from the Bay Area, he came to Charleston, South Carolina, he's doing us, and we're seeing people we know, telling stories we know, and it feels like we're experiencing that story, and we know it to be authentic, and yet we're also having a different experience now of that core part of who our community is. It's no longer just this thing that almost broke us. Now it's this piece of art. But you're also witnessing them.
Yes.
And that's, I think, and so then it becomes renewal. So for me, the power of the theater is it is this matrix of seeing. Because you saw her so deeply, all of a sudden everyone gets to see anew through your seeing of them. And kind of what you're saying about even the craft, where like, I mean, I know this too from teaching acting and acting, but like the actors on stage are like, you can't watch yourself.
No. No.
What am I doing with my hands? Wrong question.
Yeah.
You've got to watch your scene part, and you've got to, and similarly, the journalism, the theater of it is seeing someone else and honoring them with all of your talent and being, and then when they get to see your seeing, I think that's something quite spiritual.
And the one of the things that is my favorite part about it, and it doesn't happen every night, but there's times when the audience starts to fall into this like, yeah.
They're witnessing.
And they truly become me, because when I was hanging out with this person, and if we all know when you're doing active listening, unintentionally you go, yeah, oh yeah, Like if you listen to your recordings, you're like, wow, there's a lot of, it's not just now you talk. I'm like, no, you're having a conversation. And when there's times when that happens in the theater and it's like, okay, we're doing this thing.
Yeah. You'll have to come see the show.
more than once.
And it's also good journalism
Yes.
at the same time. I'm struck by that. And also becoming part of the meeting. That's a very, the call and response American thing, you know, that people say, well, how do Americans get into this so easily? Well, I think Americans have been doing this ever since. I've been doing a lot of reading of the Declaration of Independence. You know, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Okay. And we're talking about unalienable or inalienable. Which is which? Where's the story? How did you first? I'm going to take Dan back a bit because didn't you go to Northwestern?
Yeah.
Isn't there a school of journalism there?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've been starting to, like Michael, who has a really brilliant Substack that you should all check out. I started writing a Substack because I thought I was going to write a book, and then I realized, well, no, I should just put it online. And so I have this that's called Go There to Know There, which is in honor of Zora Neale Hurston, her line in Their Eyes Were Watching God, the great ethnographer. And I've been starting to tell all these stories about how I got into this. And one of them is, I went to Northwestern. I studied. First, I was a history major. Then I tried to be a film major. I was too scared to declare myself as a theater major. And I found performance studies where I could go out into the world. And I'd already been kind of doing that. I would get on a random stop. If people know, Evanston, where Northwestern is the suburb just north of Chicago, but you can take the train into Chicago, and I'd get off at a random stop and walk around a different neighborhood every night and just kind of talk to people. And I was in a Dunkin' Donuts in Uptown talking to a guy about Machiavelli, who was a pimp for gigolos, it turned out. And I went to a place where guys were recovering from the Persian Gulf War, and they sort of like were, come on, help me. And I was in a senior citizens home doing salsa dancing with a whole bunch of Puerto Rican senior citizens. And one of the things I learned was that people always ask me, like, well, how do you get people to talk? And I say this all the time. I go around the country and say, like, who feels like they're understood in the world? And nobody raises their hand, because we all go through the world mostly feeling misunderstood. And I tell my students, when you come with curiosity and respect and genuine care and interest in what somebody else has to say, you are offering them a gift to be understood on a deep level in that moment. Because even our partners and our friends, they're coming in with all this baggage. So they're like, okay, so you think you're this. Well, I know what you are. But when you come and you say, who are you? Tell me who you are. I'm down to know. People go, wait, you want to hear my story? So I started to find this thing, and I'd go around, and then I found this. There's a whole methodology, and there's an ethics, and there's a process, and how do you get permission, and how do you get trust, and all these things that I've learned, so that I've learned really doing the work better and stronger and with better ethics actually makes the work better. That trust, that permission is essential to having people say, okay. And people almost become collaborators. They're like, oh, okay, do you want to get this audio? This is like pretty good audio. Do you want to record this? And I'm like, yes, thank you, you know? So that's a little bit how I got into it. And yeah, I now I'm here.
Yep. And I'm just, when you mentioned Zora Neale Hurston, who happened to be my godmother. Oh,
No,
that's great.
no way.
I gotta keep that look. The three of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the ethnography, the storytelling, the gathering things together, perfect. You're her great grandson or something.
Wow.
Great grandson.
Wow.
Anyway. It's time for the audience to have do any of you have anything you'd like to ask? Okay. I'm going to go over there first. It's okay, they're recovering
Yeah. I'm on my
from
second
this
glass of
amazing
water.
information. Okay, go ahead. Give your name and your question.
Sure. My name is Barbara Harriman.
Whoops.
My name is Barbara Harriman, and my question is, do you stay in touch with any of the people that you perform on stage?
Yeah. One of the great pleasures and privileges is people say you don't make friends after 30, but I keep making friends because I keep meeting all these people. So yeah, I mean, we're trying to go back to Atlanta, for instance, because I want Sean to see the show and bring all his canvasser people. So I'm in touch with him. Margaret and Polly, we're still in touch with them. There's a whole bunch of, I try to keep going back, and there's people, from Nigeria I still keep in touch with Williams Okosi, who was a militant who, when I showed up in this way out of the way, three hours on a boat ride village where there was a lot of militants who were sort of ostensibly fighting against the oil companies and the Nigerian government. When I showed up there, they kind of did this whole posturing for about an hour and a half, and then I told them, well, I'm actually planning on staying here for several nights, and they were like, what? Okay, never mind. Okay, well, we got to figure out where this guy's going to stay. I ended up staying with him and went back several times, and he actually then ended up leaving militancy. I went back to Nigeria, got to perform the show, flew him up, first time he ever got on a plane. He saw the show. The thing that was really interesting and the thing that I like about this story is that he decided to leave militancy because he saw me going around his village gathering stories. And he had gone to the military, left it because it was too brutal. He is good at shooting, so he became a sharpshooter, a sniper with the militants, because that's the only way he thought he could provide for his family. And he saw me going around and doing this whole thing of gathering stories, and it just blew his mind. Oh, there's all these other possibilities out there. And he went back. He got a scholarship to go to university in Accra, and he now is a small-time oil businessman because they had been locked out of being able to do the trade. Really, that was their main grievance. It's like how all this money is leaving here. We're businessmen too. We're hustlers too. Why is it only these foreigners are getting the contracts? But the thing I love about that is that it shows that the work is has an impact. Just even the work of it, just even like going out, and people say that all the time. They're like, man, so you just go around the country and you do this, or you just travel around and you do this? Like, wow, that's really interesting. It's a different way. It's a huge pleasure and a privilege to be able to move in the world like that. There's so little space that there's allowed for, like, yeah, that's a job. And I think it softens people a little bit because the economy is so brutal on a certain, and it's, so yeah, there's that story. So yes, I do keep in touch with people. Sorry.
No, that's good.
My name is Ruth, and I just want to say I love your work. I can still see you doing some of the characters of border people. And it was so moving to know that people cross the border back and forth, that they could, go wake up one side and go to work on the other side. And that was right when everyone was trying to blame the borders. And so it was very moved. I've known Dan for many years because his family we were all part of the circus, the Pickle family circus, and he grew up with my niece and all these different people. And your father was a brilliant actor. And I wonder how growing up in that circus theater community influenced you as an actor, because you have this brilliant physical ability, which some actors don't, but also you have an amazing ability to listen. And that's what comes through. So I'm just curious, how did that influence you as you became an actor and a listener?
Well,
And a clown.
Yeah. I'd say two things. One is that my dad was a model of that you could make a living and have a stable existence as a actor performer, which maybe was nuts to think that was totally realistic, but But I've been blessed so far with the ability to do that. We know the how difficult theater is right now to continue to sustain itself, but that's another discussion.
His
So that-
father is Jeff Hoyle.
Yeah, and they were part of the Pickle Family Circus. And my sister was one of the clowns in the Pickle, so it was all this family
Yeah,
stuff.
and the other thing I would just say is, traveling around. I mean, we would go to these random California towns, and I could just kind of like go around, and we'd be in Fort Bragg or Ukiah or wherever, and we'd be on bikes, and we'd go check out the local vibes. So there might have been some of that. But I think I was always interested in getting out of my bubble in a way. That was always the thing from early on.
And did you act when you were young, like when you were growing up in school and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I was in some of the plays. Yeah.
He couldn't
You should go
escape.
see his show. He's brilliant.
And there's a question back here.
Where was right, oh, there you were.
Hi, my name is Kara, and my question is about, actually, could you speak more on the ethics of both story gathering and storytelling?
Good question.
Yeah, so for me it's really important to, I mean, so there's a mix of the way the stories come together. Some of them are I reach out to people, I found them, doing research, and then I find them, and then I reach out to them and have like an initial Zoom or phone call and kind of figure out, oh, is this enough to fly out to meet them and tell them what I'm doing, and then there's some people who I just meet when I'm out there, and so I try to say, like, within, you can't, like, every person you're talking to, and it's actually bad if you're just hanging out to lead. Every person you're talking to is, hi, my name is Dan Hoyle, I'm a playwright, and I'm doing this. But within the first 5 minutes, it's pretty easy to drop in, and so so there's some people that it's like, yes, I'm creating this thing, I'm an actor and a playwright, I give all the spiel up front, and then there's other times where it's like, I talk to somebody for 10 minutes, and then I say that, and then if it's somebody that I'm really interested, I say, can I audio record? It's always very like, and what's so interesting about it is that people are like, yeah, okay. And there's times when they'll like, I'll hang out with them the second time. And they're like, are you going to record? Cause they enjoy I think they enjoy having that voice, that attention, really. I mean, listening to somebody, Al Letson says, listening is the biggest, and attention is the biggest act of love we give people. So there's that. And then if there's somebody that's like, really, they're going to be, I ask, hey, do you want it to be your name? Do you want me to change the name? Most of the time people want it to be their names. Then there's some people where it's like, I met the bartender, I never got to see him again. He's a bartender. It's too hard. I didn't get to get his. So there's somebody like that where it's more like, I told him what I was doing. He clearly gave me this story. I'm not able to follow up to say, and invite him to the show. And yeah, I think it's really important. The greater imbalance of power, the more important it is in really knowing how you might be perceived. And a lot of it, though, is really, to me, it's less what you say and it's more how you conduct yourself. And that gives people the understanding that, okay, he's going to take care of my story. Mm-hmm. He's doing this. He has a process. He's listening to me more intently than anyone has, including my wife and my daughters and my parents. He's asking questions that people haven't asked me in 10 years, just follow-up questions, not, and I really try to let them lead. But if there's a question, if there's something that somebody says that I think an audience is going to be like, ooh, I need to know more about that, or I need context, I say, hey, you said this thing, like, can you explain that? I try to give them I try to just know whatever the audience, whatever questions that are going to come up for them, I need to ask those questions. And then the big thing is just like trying to fill in the context as much as possible. And that's where it's not 100% verbatim. Like, I don't just take the interview and cut it up. It is shaped and molded, and there's lines that are added to complete the thought, or to, if they don't know that in that moment there was a guy in there who had a big blanket over him, like, and they're making some comment. This hasn't happened. I'm just saying, for instance, you need to have somebody, that character, say like, well, the guy over there with the blanket, because it's not the same as just roll the tape. It's a piece of theater. And so there is a transformation that needs to happen. So to me, it's more important to try to create that context, even if it's not 100% verbatim. Because we all know you can take 100%, you can interview somebody for several hours, cut up 5 minutes, and make them look terrible.
Yes. Yes.
And that's not the point.
Can you talk really quickly about your question about including Polly's story that you had and the ethics around that, and then your choice to do so?
Yeah, well, so it was hard for me. I was thinking like, gosh, how do I have the ability to tell this person's story? And we struggled a lot. And at first, I didn't even want to go talk to her first, because I thought, that's not my story to tell. That's like a bridge too far. And I generally, the thing that I do, the reason why I play people across the spectrum is because I'm not playing, this is not my impression of this group of people. It's this person who happens to be this, and this. And so when we go, and like going back to Charleston, we got to perform this show, and it's very, I wouldn't say diverse. It's black and white, but it's healthy from both black and white in terms of in the audience. They don't feel like, oh, this is some guy doing a type of person. He's just telling stories of people. But even then with Polly, it's like, wow, that's so specific. It's laden with trauma. The layers are so intense for me as a white guy to be telling that story. But when I went to talk to her, and it turns out she's a big fan of theater. And she says, are you doing a one-man show? That's okay. I love theater. Mm-hmm. And I go back to talk to her and I say, hey, is it okay if she says, yeah, you can do it. You got to tell the story. So then to me, the responsibility is if she's telling me, yeah, do it. I've given you my time. You do it. And then it almost feels worse to then not do it, because then it feels like, and I was talking to this playwright, Robert O'Hara, today, who said, sometimes we get so caught up in that there becomes an erasure where they say, we're like, no, let's not tell that story. That's too complicated. That's too messy. It might freak out some people. There might be, a lady who, and usually what it is there's a woman who is worried on behalf of some other marginalized group, but it's not actually somebody from that group, because they come and they say, we hear this all the time, say, I was skeptical. And then I thought, dang, thank you for telling these stories in the right way. So that was like a huge thing. And we went back, we tried to tell it a million different ways, and we finally came back. And I remember Aldo being like, you just got to you got to do this. You just got to do it. Get over it. Get over yourself. Serve the thing.
Just let the story be.
Yeah.
Kind of. So we are about the time to have it to close up our recorded portion of this program. And I am very excited to hear what it is that you've been saying. And I want to thank you all for being here, and thank those who are listening online. And I want to remind everyone that you can listen again to this program in a few days. It'll be, the recording will be on our website, and just go to the programs, audio, video programs, and look for Takes All Kinds, and there we will be again.
And can I say real quickly?
Yes.
Please come see the show.
Yes.
Because don't just
don't just
if
listen.
you just hear the
See
talking
work.
part and don't come see the show.
And I'm about to say,
Great, thank you.
And you can see it.
Yep.
I'm about to say that.
Anne's going to tell you where.
And so it's at the Marsh Theater, which is on Valencia Street in San Francisco. And it will be this weekend, and it's been extended through April?
Yeah, into April.
Into April. So go to the Marsh, San Francisco. There's 2 marshes. Go to the Marsh.
We're doing Marin Shakes this Saturday. We're going to Arcata. We're going to Sun Valley, Idaho. We're going to West Palm Beach, Florida. And I think DC and Atlanta. So tell your peoples.
We will. And you will tell all of us as well. So we really cordially invite you to come back. As you can see, we have a huge variety. You never know where the conversation or how far forward or back it's going to take you. And we invite you to invite your colleagues and friends to buy tickets and participate in our special events. And we definitely, eagerly, certainly look forward to your returning early and often during the Commonwealth Club World Affairs 123rd year of enlightened public discussion. Thank you.